Okay, so Mollye Asher is the Academy Award-winning producer of NOMADLAnd. She scored multiple awards that year, from the Gothams to Film Independent Spirit Awards and so forth. She has produced three of Chloé Zhao's features, the others being Songs My Brother Taught Me, The Writer, and other credits including Swallow, Fort Tilden, and She's Lost Control. Mollye earned her MFA in film from NYU and is a member of the Academy. And in true indie style, she walked here today. Please join me in welcoming Mollye for our first session. So Mollye, could you talk a little bit about your background, how you got started as an actor, right, in musical theatre? Could you talk a little bit about the path from that to where you are, or at least how you got into producing?
Yeah, I always like to add in, I always like to bring up the musical theater part because it seems like it's such a different person than who I am. But yeah, I was trained as a singer and a dancer growing up, and then I went to undergrad at NYU for musical theater, realized I liked straight acting a lot more, and so I was pursuing that, but also getting frustrated with not really having any kind of control over my career. So I made a short with some friends and then discovered that I really liked putting it all together and being behind the camera. So I was a little bit older at that time, and so I thought, I don't want to go up from PA at that point, up the ladder that way. So a friend who was at Columbia University recommended that I apply to film school, and so I did, and that's kind of what launched my life now.
Do you think it's, as a producer, do you think it's good to come through creative, physical production, or as an executive? Where do you think is the good path? And obviously there's no one answer to that. But in your experience, do you think going through the creative side, seeing what it's like as an actor was the best way for you?
There's so many different ways, like you said, to go about it, and working with different producers in various different capacities where they're bringing their own expertise and skills. It's really nice to have people coming from different backgrounds. But I think for me, I don't know if it was the right path, but it sort of, I think, dictates in a way the way that I work with filmmakers, like coming from an artistic background, also, writing and directing myself, that I understand the vulnerability, I guess, and what it takes creatively. So I think that's in part of my style in a way. But
you've also line produced as well, right?
Yeah.
So how has that informed your skill set?
Yeah, I mean, in order to just make something happen, you kind of just have to do whatever you can to make it happen, and so part of that is scheduling and budgeting a film, and then like on my first film with Chloé, there were 9 of us, there were 6 on the rider, but we didn't have the money, so I was also doing accounting, and while line producing is not something that I enjoy, I think it's so important now, as I'm like overseeing productions, that I understand what it takes to write the budget and maintain it.
Have you gotten to the point now in your career where you can look at a script? I mean, obviously, if the script has a lot of big set pieces, it's different. But can you look at a script and go, all right, I kind of know the ballpark that's going to cost? Are you there yet, or?
In a way, yes. I think there's like when you read a script and what you think it'll cost, and then there's also when you read a script and think, what will the market pay for this? And that's oftentimes different. But yeah, I mean, there are times that I've gone into producing something where I discovered along the way that I wasn't thinking about. Like there was a project I was on that was all set in a moving vehicle, and I thought like, oh well, that's just one location, but it's actually quite expensive, especially if you're doing that in New York City.
Got it. So obviously this business is, whether you're a producer or a director, it's a lot of it's about taste. So how did you, going back to your early years, but even today, how did you did you have an idea of the types of projects you wanted to work on? Did you have an idea of the sort of filmmakers that you were looking to collaborate with? And is that evolved over time?
It's definitely evolved over time. Like I didn't know going into it what my particular taste was, but I quickly started to see what I was gravitating toward. You know, there are certain films that I like. I tend to be interested in character first and foremost, but it's really been as I've been choosing projects, which, there's different ways that I've been choosing projects as I've grown. At first it was like purely gut. I like this script, I like this filmmaker, let's just go make it happen. And then once I started to try and make those films, also once I started working for an equity fund and seeing like that there are other elements, like I was saying, the marketplace, that's in some way also started to not necessarily affect my taste, but affect like what I choose to work on.
Well, just continuing on that, and I did want to ask this later, but I'll tackle it now. Obviously, you work with filmmakers, and whether a filmmaker is audience focused or not, how do you reconcile now an audience? And it's really two questions here. Like, how do you understand the audience as a producer? How do you get to know the audience? And secondly, how do you reconcile that with particularly if there's any conflict between what the filmmaker wants and what you believe as a business person the producer might want? And excuse me for calling you a business person, by the way.
I think you're the first person who's called me that.
Really?
That's an interesting question. I mean, I don't think I've ever come into a conflict between what the filmmaker thinks of as the audience and what I see as the audience. I don't have a problem working on projects that have a limited audience, because I feel like that's just as valuable, and there are beautiful things that can come from not trying to please everyone. But for sure, I'm always looking to work with filmmakers that aren't just looking to make a movie for themselves, but and actually I started teaching during the pandemic, and I was thinking about, pitching and things like that, and I was looking back at my old decks from Chloe's first film, and we were trying to identify. We were going through it was at the time called IFP, but now the
Gotham's right.
lab, and we had to do this presentation, and one of the things was identifying our niche, our core audience, and I had written there Native Americans, and while that definitely makes sense, would be our core audience, I feel like in some ways it limited us when we went out there to pitch the project, because it was actually a lot broader who our audience is. If you think about, who goes to film festivals, and so my understanding of audience has also evolved over time.
Yep. Got it. And so could you talk a little bit about your development process? Do you get involved in an idea pre-script stage? And I'm sure it varies depending on the filmmakers you work with, but what do you like as a producer? How early do you normally like to get involved?
I mean, I like to get involved early. Most often there's a script that's not quite ready and not quite there yet, so I'm seeing what I think the filmmaker's vision is. But I have started to work on projects where it's just like a kernel of an idea and we start to play around with it. But usually there might be like a treatment or a outline, at least, of the project, of the story.
Okay. And you worked at Game Changer, didn't you? You're right. So what was that like to work on a slate of projects, or to build a slate of projects? If that was the case. I mean, again, it kind of comes back to my earlier comment. Is that good as a producer in terms of becoming more rounded in being in-house somewhere?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was the first time I ever had a steady paycheck.
It's nice, isn't it? Every once in a while. Sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, well, that was my first experience of looking at projects and thinking about what's the budget, what's the audience, what is the marketplace buying these kinds of projects for, and Yeah, I mean, in a way, with there being a slate, you can take some risks on projects where you might think, okay, this one has a bit more of a broader audience, maybe, and it has like cast attached, so it might be a little bit more less risky, and then maybe take a risk on something that's smaller. Although I do have to say that, like, from my experience, there a lot of times that what's in the package and on the page does not necessarily mean success, and oftentimes um, something that looks like it's very not commercially viable, like the rider, which Minette, who was the president of Game Changer at the time, will openly say that she regrets passing on that one. But like on the page, it doesn't look like it's going to be successful commercially. So I feel like, assessing a project, that was something I learned, that like you definitely want to go into a project knowing that it has these different elements that are mitigating the risk, but that's not necessarily how to choose a project.
Got it. So I remember you mentioned Gotham, so they were formerly IFP, and I think they used to put out, I can't remember whether it was the 20 filmmakers or 15 filmmakers to watch. I think it was in 2016 that I first heard about Zoe. So sorry, Chloé. So could you talk a little bit about how you met Chloé? Really the genesis of that relationship, which has obviously been important for both of you.
Yeah, we went to film school together.
Okay.
When I started film school, I went there very, very focused on what I was looking for. I wanted to explore writing and directing myself, but I went there like looking and seeing like who are the people who are going to be my people, like who are the people that I have similar work ethics, that the way that they're doing their short films or their exercises. And Chloé and I, we connected right away with the love of Wong Kar-wai, but we really were friends. I joke that we would like close down the bar across the way from NYU. And so it came from that. I actually never produced her shorts during the school, but she was working on her first feature and had gone through the labs at Sundance, and then brought it to me to produce.
And then what, so the first film was Songs My Brother Taught Me, right? So where did that come from? What was, so you're the producer, you've got Chloé, she's got this vision for something. Could you talk a little, because it would have been a very risky, not a particularly commercial project. How did that all come about?
It was very, very hard, and lots of lessons learned, and so the script that she had like 30 drafts of, that was this project, that was what we were going around pitching. And I always think about this one time when we were at Fast Track, which is part of Film Independence, a program. It's like a market, and I remember pitching it to this company, and like we had footage from Pine Ridge, the reservation we were working on, with the actor and all, and there was just silence after we pitched it, and it was just completely, they were not getting it at all. I remember thinking, like, you could at least say that this is not for me, but it was a very awkward moment, but also like a good learning experience of pitching. But so that project evolved because we had a traditional budget written for it. We knew that she wanted to cast a lot of local actors, but at the time we were also thinking of bringing in some actors. Couldn't find the financing, got a lot of grants, eventually did get some financing to finance the film, thought the money was there. And this was like after years of developing it. So, and by developing it, it's a little bit different with Chloé in some ways, because a lot of the development is really, really on the ground. Because a lot of her writing comes from people that she's meeting. But we went out to make the film, and then got a phone call from the financier saying that the money was not coming through, and we'd have to go home. And at that point, we were having like a regular crew. Like, we had a production designer out there buying things. We were just about to fly out our AD, and we went home. And then a couple months later, financier said we need to push again. And so that's when Chloé called and was like, how much money do we have in the bank? And like, do you think we could make it for that? And I was like, yeah, let's try. I mean, we've been working so hard, all this, you can't just like throw it away. And so that then was sort of the beginning of the kind of way we worked and the way that she developed how she wrote The Rider and then Nomadland. Where she was like, okay, let's just have a dock-sized crew. Let's I'm gonna throw away the script and we're gonna keep the arc, but like let the land and the people help us tell.
So
the
necessity
story.
is the mother of invention kind of thing.
Exactly. Yes.
Well, Chloe's quoted as saying that pep talk you gave her, or that attitude you gave her, is why she wants to continue to work with you. That was a game changer for her that you said that. You know, again, being the cheerleader, I imagine is a skill set that a producer has to have, right? You know,
yeah, and also being able to be realistic, but without being negative about it. You know, because sometimes there is bad news you have to give.
Yeah. So Songs comes out, and that obviously prepared both of you for The Rider. You know, was The Rider a little bit, and the Rider was definitely. I mean, that was commercially successful, wasn't it? Mm-hmm. But was you know, how did you? Could you talk a little bit about that jump from Songs to Rider, and was it easier? Was it harder? And another thing to ask is, I mean, are you good at asking people for money? Is it tough?
Well, I kind of don't think about it necessarily as asking for money, but like finding somebody who's as excited about a project as I am. And so, you know, I've learned better ways over the years of how to talk about a project. But, you know, yeah, I'm not good at just asking for money. But I don't find that I necessarily do it that straightforward. But going from Songs to The Rider was, you know, still no one wanted to finance The Rider. I mean, the film Songs had critically did really well. Sundance, Cannes, Spirit Award nominations, but then still couldn't find money for The Rider. And there was, you know, there was an impatience there as well. Like, we don't want to wait around again. And so, you know, plenty of people saying like it's too risky. You know, go and make it and then come back for finishing funds. And so we did with the money that Chloe had. It was a very, 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 very minimal shooting budget. Like, I was waking up early and making lunches for everybody.
Oh, really? So was the budget for The Rider, was it significantly
smaller?
It was. So it was, but it was obviously more than Songs.
No, smaller than Songs.
Oh,
yeah.
Really? Oh, okay.
Yeah. And then, you know, once we had it in Cannes and she had edited a few scenes, we brought it back to one of the people who had said, get it in the Cannes first, and then they came in with the finishing funds. Yep. But we had the same problem of after Songs with, you know, trying to find financiers.
Right. I wanted to open up for any questions. If we could go, mate.
You kind of talked about briefly that you look for something commercial, yet it might not necessarily be there on the page. What exactly is that quality that you look for?
Yeah, it's definitely elusive, but I feel like it's, if I see something that I haven't seen before, or somebody's talking about something that I have never seen it talked about in that sort of way, if I, you know, I'm just, like, I think about that, about like Everything Everywhere All at Once, you know, probably reading that on the page, it was like, whoa, what is this? But also it was something special, you know, like there was a real, and then of course looking at their previous work, but what's going to really like grab people, because there's just so much out there that, you know, finding something that has its unique voice, that's what I'm looking for. And I feel like audiences ultimately are too.
Any more questions? So Chloe was I think the third woman to win a Best Director Academy, right? I tried to do some research on how many women have won the best producers that have won the Best Picture. I wasn't able to do that. I'm sure not many. You know, talking a little bit about representation and diversity. I mean, what have you seen over the last in the period of your career? Are you seeing? You obviously seen improvement, but you continue to see some improvement. How do you think we can be better in terms of representation?
Yeah, there's definitely been improvement, and like things that I heard when I was pitching projects years ago. I don't even want to say what people said, as far as like what will finance a movie, but I think where we can go more is that the gatekeepers, that there's more diversity with the people who are making the decisions of greenlighting projects, more diversity in that respect. And then, of course, I think more diversity behind the camera. I think there needs to be more training programs, or even just so people even see that it's a possibility. I think there's an opportunity for unions to work on training up and coming people.
So just getting back in terms of, obviously, Chloé, you and Chloé went into some pretty remote parts of the country and told very different stories, underrepresented people. Why do you think Chloé kind of had that passion to tell the story of those folks? Where do you think that came from?
Well, I think she's always been interested in people that are not from the world she's from. I relate in that way. I think she also thinks a lot about home, and what that means to people, because I think there's a similarity between Songs My Brothers Taught Me and Nomadland in that sense. In Songs My Brothers Taught Me, it's a young man who's trying to decide whether he should go to college and leave his family in the reservation or stay home. And then, in Nomadland, your home is wherever you go. So I think that's a lot of it.
Yep. Any more questions? Okay, mate.
You said that you look for people who share your level of excitement about the project. Say you are describing a project. What is your way in with someone? Like, how do you make them excited about a particular project that you're working on?
Well, I like to think about what is going to interest them. So it depends on who I'm talking to. If I'm talking to a DP, for example, like with my film Swallow, it was a low budget film. So when I'm thinking about like who we're going to for it, like who needs it, and then for a financier, like what do they care about? So that it's always like there's a give and take. And so I'm always kind of, whether while I'm pitching it, seeing what they're responding to, or, doing research before I meet with them.
In The Rider, that the lead actor and also his friend who was in the hospital are such key, true like real life characters. Were they? And I know Nomadland is different because Nomadland is different in that there's an established actor, but the world and the people are very real people. Are they people that are part? Do those people in those stories form part of the development process, and are you part of that process, or are they more, when it comes to casting, brought in?
With The Rider, Chloé had met Brady, the cowboy, shortly after we did songs, and she just was drawn to him and knew she wanted to tell a story with him in it. Didn't know what, and then this accident happened, and then she thought, okay, this is my story. And so a lot of it was developed by, his friends and his community. And the Nomadland was a little bit different, where the writing and the casting and the locations are always kind of part of her writing process. And so, looking for the right nomads, of course there were the ones that were from the book, they were going to be in the film. But then there are various other people who have some specific lines or roles, and that's also where I come in, and it's sort of an interesting way of development where it's not necessarily like sitting there with a script and saying, well, this section's not working, this section's working, but finding people, finding locales that will then inspire her.
Thank you.
Yeah, hi, Mollye. In your experience so far, how has
Sorry.
Do you want the mic?
I'm good.
All right.
Thank you. In your experience so far, how has the growth of streaming influenced independent film production?
That was one of my questions.
Yeah, I mean, I think in a lot of ways I know I hear people saying, I mean, it's obviously it's changing even more now, but like that there's more opportunity, there's more places for films to go, but I actually don't see it positively in that way because, streamers are then producing projects and they're not going to be as they aren't going to take risks as much as say like.
And they're going direct to talent, right, as well. Are they bypassing the producers? Have you heard about that?
Well, I guess a lot of what's happening, yes, and which is why I think that there's a producers union that's starting to grow, or because they might develop things in house and then just hire someone to produce it. And I've talked to filmmakers who have gone through that process and have said that they don't feel like the film was as successful as it could have been, or whatever, or TV show without having that producer alongside. But I'm kind of happy that things aren't quite working out for the streamers, because then maybe people might buy the indie films that we're making.
Right. And you, is there still the model? I hear it's changing, but is there still the model where the streamers will buy out all the contingent comp? There'll be no back end. Is that still something that they do, or are they looking at changing how they essentially license or commission a lot of these, at least from the indie film standpoint? I know TVs it might be a bit different, or episodic.
I'm not quite sure. I think with Nomadland we were bought out, but I don't. But it was still like early in the process of I think of these streamers figuring that out. But I know when I'm negotiating with cast, there'll be a clause in their contract that if it's bought straight to streaming, that they get a bonus because they know they're not going to get back end.
Right. Got it. So you've worked mostly with features, but are you involved at all in TV development? Anything that you could talk about, and how has the experience been different for you as a producer?
Yeah, I want to definitely get into television. I certainly watch a lot of television, and I think that there's something really fun about really being able to dive into worlds and characters even more. I have a project that I'm developing. It's early on, but so I'm just sort of stepping my toe into it.
And as a producer, is it? Could you talk a little, whether it's the financing model? Or even as an independent, like how do they differ in terms of putting the financing plan together for it? I mean, obviously in TV you can go straight to a buyer and get everything set up, but in terms of any kind of front-on development work or anything along those lines, I mean, how different is it for you as a producer to do that? Is there anything you could specifically talk about?
Between features and TV?
Between features and TV, and I suppose what I'm saying is obviously with features, you've obviously got the script process, the development process. But with TV, often you've got to be able to kind of put the package together, whether it's the Bible or whatever. And that needs to be paid for sometimes, whether it goes to the buyer or not beforehand. Like in terms of the financing model for TV is really what I'm asking. Have you noticed any major difference?
No. Again, though, I'm just stepping my foot into it. But I feel like it's sort of the same as far as development, and you don't get paid for it.
Yep.
And maybe you can if there's an IP or something that you can get someone to buy to option for you, and then the screenwriter might get paid, but the producer doesn't. And actually, the producer doesn't get paid until a project is greenlit too,
Yep.
so they go through the whole development.
Got it. Any other questions?
How did you overcome, when you got the feedback that something was critically successful or praised, but there wasn't the commercial drive there? How did you kind of bridge that gap early on?
I mean, I don't know, because I still would go with my gut and what I like. I think that there were things that we could have done differently with songs in order to have found its audience more. I mean, it still is its own self, which is limited. But I don't think I really changed necessarily, like how I'm going to choose a project based on how difficult songs was. I just will know when I'm going into it that it's going to be tough. Although I have tended in some way to do a little bit more genre stuff that still has depth and something to say, but they're easier to pitch.
Oh, actually, you go, and then you go.
Hi. So obviously there's no like clear path up in this crazy business we're all in, but what advice do you have for somebody that, wants to be putting projects together in the way that you do, like really from the ground up championing like development, financing, production, festivals? Is it, going in-house somewhere at a production company? Is it just really like quitting your job and shooting the movies that you love with your filmmaker friends, like, is it, yeah, working in development and just reading. For me, I would like to do what you do, but it's hard because I don't want to read scripts all day. I really want to make stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I was in school, and then we had like a few years of our thesis years. So I decided that during that time I was going to continue to get student loans while I made indie films where I didn't get paid. Whereas I know a lot of other people didn't continue to rack up those loans and went straight to just, it was harder for those people, I think, to start to get their careers off the ground because they were trying to pay off those student loans. I just decided I was going to just forget that they existed. But it's interesting because I recently I had started a company with another producer, and we got a first look deal somewhere. Eventually decided creatively to go back on my own and to see what else is out there. And that's when I realized that like there is this whole other world that you're talking about of like going and working in development somewhere, going and working in a production company where you can actually have like a steady pay. And I had never had that. I was just picking up jobs here and there. So there and there's a lot that you can really gain from seeing the machinations within that system. I guess all I'm saying is that if you go my way, it's really, 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 really can be very disconcerting and just it's very hard. You have to live a very frugal life, but keep your network of friends that are passing along jobs. And I don't know if that's very helpful. It's maybe a little bit depressing, but.
That was pretty much my question, but try to shape it in a different way. But I guess what advice, having been in the industry for a while, being where you are now, what advice or lessons learned would you give someone, who is now like where you were, in film school doing their MFA?
Well, I would definitely say, like, stay connected with those people. It could be really hard because you're with one another, like, day in and day out, and then suddenly you're out of school and you're all alone. And a lot of people end up getting lost, and they end up getting jobs places and not returning to film. But I think that it's so important, even if it's difficult, like even if you're feeling bad about yourself and where you are, to maintain those relationships, because a lot of people are feeling the same way. Commiserate with one another. Like I said, like people will pass jobs off to you. So, I was getting, like producing industrials and things. So, my advice would be just to like hold on to those connections and to really give back too. Like I found that really helped maintain my network of people, grew my network of people too, of like being somebody people could ask for recommendations of a production designer or whatever.
and you're giving back today.
Right.
Yeah. So, actually, you talk a lot about mental health, and I think in this business, and I think, did you teach a class at Rutgers on, right, this idea of keeping going and all those sorts of things? So, I mean, how important is, I mean, you've kind of touched on it, but how important is that, do you think, in being a successful producer, or really being a successful film practitioner?
Yeah, you did your research. So yeah, I was teaching at Rutgers, and my last class of the semester is how to keep going, and like what are the ways to keep yourself motivated and healthy, and I am definitely not good at it. So it's probably why I think about it a lot. But I think from what I see of people who are staying healthy in their endeavors is having interests outside of film. It also, I think, just is inspiring as well. Friends outside of film, traveling, I think it's all the things that are also going to inspire you. But and also probably understanding your boundaries. So I'm someone can call me at 2:00 in the morning, a filmmaker, and I'm going to answer it, but that's not maybe for everyone, and understanding like what you can handle, and also being, of course, upfront with the people you're working with.
Got it. Any other questions?
I have one, kind of an extension of what a lot of people have asked, and it's just, what do you think makes a great producer? Like, if you were looking at young up-and-coming producers, and for you to be like, oh, they're good, they've got it, what is that you're looking for?
Yeah, I'm thinking of someone in particular who I'm just like, I'm just so excited about her. Well, I guess I'll just describe her. I mean, she's, I can see she's really smart. Like, well, first of all, I see she has a distinguishable taste. It's varied in ways, but she knows that, like, she's very filmmaker centric, like I am, so I connected with her in that way. But she reaches out a lot for asking questions, so people are starting to know her in the industry. So she knows what she doesn't know, and she's. I can see that she has the kind of ambition that she's not going to get dissuaded by doors closing, and so, like, resourceful, and just also like pleasant to be around. Like, when she's pitching projects, I'm getting excited about them. Yeah, I think just, and also this is a big thing. I could see the relationships she has with the filmmakers she's working with, and I see that they're like really loyal and special, and she's close to them. So that was something too I identified with her. So I don't know if that answered your question, but.
Any other questions? Come on.
Yes, thank you so much. You've chosen to stay here in New York. I'd like you to speak a little bit about that, why you didn't choose to go to LA, and the differences maybe, and the very specific reason that you stayed here. This is a theater town, more than film really, though indie film obviously is here, and I'm just very curious as to what your choices.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't even think about it when I finished film school. I was just like, this is where I was, and I was like jumping right into making movies with my classmates who were all here at the time. So I just, that was no question. Of course, along the way, I've thought about it, as everybody I know is moving to the West Coast, and I still do think about it. But, to what we're talking about of like mental health and keeping yourself, like it is nice that living in New York, there is something other than the industry. But I don't know. I always wanted to live in New York growing up, and there's something about the people and the energy. And there's also, having gone to NYU, I feel like it's not just NYU, but it's the city that just like, we're gonna figure out like how we're gonna get through this, or I just feel like my heart is here. Yeah.
Any other questions? Go.
Thank you. Um, so, um, so I think like you and Chloé Zhao's collaboration and relationship is like all the director and producer would want, and it's really really perfect. I wonder, have you worked with many other directors before, and then could you share with us some experience that maybe went wrong, and then could you give us one or two red flags you can kind of give advice to young producer to look at when working with director? Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good question. I have worked with a lot of different directors. Um, and one thing that is similar of all of them is I'm gonna I'm gonna make this, like you're coming or not, like we're making this. There is no no. Um, when and I have made mistakes along the way working on projects with filmmakers that when it went wrong, it was because I realized that I had a different vision for the project than they did. Um, so there was a project I was working on where the filmmaker really wanted to. She wasn't American, but really wanted to tell this American story. And when I was working on the script with her, she wasn't. I was trying to make a more of a clear narrative, and I realized that that's not what she wanted to do. She wanted, and so I was just going to be holding her back. And so when I've made mistakes, it's usually that I realize that like I'm not what's best for this project. You know, that's a question I often ask myself when a project comes to me. Is like, am I really additive? You know, I might like really like the project, but am I the right person to really help this filmmaker make this? And when I've made mistakes, it's possibly that I wasn't the right producer.
Any other questions?
Could you talk more about your time at Game Changer?
Yeah, I spent like maybe 9 months there, so not very long. At the end of it, actually, like the last month, it was kind of part time. I went and made the writer. Um, but yeah, I mean, what was that experience like? You know, it was projects coming in, assessing. You know, I would work with. We had interns that were reading, and they would write coverage, and then I'd work with the interns to see which ones we should consider. I would read them, and then Manette and I would discuss whether it's a project that we wanted to send to the financiers to take a look at, or the founders. Um, so a lot of it was mostly just like seeing if projects were viable creatively and commercially.
Probably got time for a couple more questions. Anyone else? Anyone?
With the development process that Chloé has, what sort of documents, what sort of materials do you actually prepare when you're going into pitch if so much of that is on the ground? Like, I mean, she obviously has, a creative, artistic mystique now that people understand, but like, I guess in the earlier films, how did you?
Yeah, we with Songs Where Brothers Taught Me, Forrest Whitaker's company came on board with that, and what excited him beyond the script was she put together footage from the time of us going to the reservation, and where she's doing research. We're all kind of meeting people and getting a lay of the land, building connections. And so that I think is a good way to sometimes get your vision across if it is a story that is not necessarily so easily pitchable.
Good time for one more question? Any more questions? Yep.
I'm really interested in Chloé herself's interest in Native American stories, particularly Pine Ridge and other areas. The Game Changer films talks about the kind of mantra, not making stories without us, about us without us. So I'm just wondering, when you approached and when you worked with Native American filmmakers, what kind of involvement were they involved in sort of producing, and also what sort of continued relationship do you have with them?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very important when I've done these projects with Chloé, like Nomadland as well. We're not from that culture. that you're really making it with the people that you're putting on screen. And so, and a lot of that is the story that's coming out, like, we're in Nomadland, like, Swanky found our area where we had this whole scene, the rubber tramp rendezvous. Like, she was the one who found that. Like, just keep making it so that we're not just that it's a community of people making a project. And I think that is what can help to make sure that it's authentic. And then relationships, they continue, because you get to know people so personally. We're shooting in their homes, and so not only are those actors getting financial reward, we're also just in touch just as their lives. Like, there's Kat Clifford, one of the actors who was in all of Chloe's movies, all three of them. He was trying to get into doing background work, so I was helping him with his resume and, like, connecting him with casting directors, and so it just naturally happens that we stay in touch.
Well, Mollye, you've been an inspiration to all of us. Congratulations on all your success, and thanks a lot for today.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.